adjust this real quick. All right, hello. My name is Tyler Palesano. I've been coming to these .NET meetup groups and JavaScript meetup groups for a long time now. I've never actually presented, so here's my first one. Recently, I was given a project that was a good candidate for me to learn Visual Studio Code, so I thought I would share what I learned today. Not an expert. I've used it for a couple months now, and I like it, so I kind of want to show other people about it. So, Visual Studio Code, if you don't know, is really, it's just a text editor. It's actually a lot more than that. It's a ridiculously customizable text editor with handy bells and whistles. By that I mean it has built-in terminals like command prompts. It has customizable tasks that you can kick off. It has integrated debugging. It has built-in Git support. It has extensions, which I'm going to talk about all of this. And a lot of just like little handy things that I haven't seen in like Visual Studio 15. It has like Markdown preview, and just like other things that I've really liked. So here's my integrated development continuum. Like on a typical day, I'm going to go in, I'm going to open up my Visual Studio 2017, 2015 project and work in that all day. But sometimes you have a one-off file or something like that that's really great for Notepad++. This fills the gap in the middle. This is going to be like if you have a directory that's not too terribly deep, excluding node modules. You'll open up that directory in Visual Studio Code, and that'll be your current solution or your environment. It's really great for scripting files, and by that I mean, like, it's really great for JavaScript projects. It's not really a scripting file. It's also good for like PowerShell scripts, or if you are doing anything of that sort, because of the extensions. Also, if you're into video game development, it works great with Unity. Unity ships with something called like a Mono Develop or Mono, something like that. You can use the Visual Studio Code instead, and it works really well. It's incredibly customizable. So when I first opened it up, there are a few things I didn't really like. I'm going to hijack this for a little bit. For instance, I didn't like how you had to save every time you changed something. So I changed one of the settings so that as soon as I typed, it would automatically save. And you don't see a little asterisk. Another thing I did is like you can, drag and drop the code if you wanted to or something like that. Anyway, every little thing I found that I didn't quite like, I just changed the customizable settings and it got to where I wanted it to be. As you would expect with Visual Studio or just an IDE in general, it has snippets and IntelliSense. Snippets are great for if you are about to start like a for each loop or something like that. You can just start typing it out. It'll recognize what you're doing, and you hit tab a couple times, and it'll fill in the rest, just like in Visual Studio 2015. It has very contextually aware IntelliSense. It actually has surprised me a couple times. I wrote this talk using Markdown, if you've seen this kind of talk before. Anyway, what I didn't expect was IntelliSense for Markdown. I couldn't remember how to include an image, and it told me, and it was really nice. Something else I really liked, because I work a lot with PowerShell, command line batch scripts, and whatever else, bash sometimes because I'm doing Git. It just has these terminals built right into the IDE, so I don't have to change Windows or Alt-Tab or anything like that. You can have multiple commands at once, command prompts at once. So here we see just a typical command prompt. In the same area, I also have a bash window. There's a little drop down. You can't see it like that. There's a little drop down right here, and now I'm on the bash one. Oops. I also have a PowerShell script running at the same time, and I can just change the window I'm on at any time, and it's really handy. I'll show an example of this here in a little bit, because it's hard to do it like that. As I mentioned at the top, there are tasks. Tasks are great for kicking off a command, so if you have like a JavaScript application that has a grunt script, or you do less, or .NET, or whatever it is, you can set it up into a task. You can then use that task with a shortcut key, or you can set it as a pre-launch task, so when you click the debug icon, it'll first run this task and then debug it, or whatever. I am using a task at this moment to run this presentation, which I should mention, I made the entire presentation in Visual Studio Code, just to give me more experience with it. I kind of had a hard time with tasks sometimes. Like every time I need to upgrade one or change it, I'm always doing it wrong and then going to Stack Overflow and figuring out how I'm supposed to do it. Maybe that's my own shortcoming. Maybe they'll fix it more in the future. I don't know. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So now to talk about what makes Visual Studio Code really good is all the extensions. Like out of the box, it really isn't much more than a text editor, but you got a couple of extensions in there. You can run your C# programs in there and debug them. It has extensions for a lot of things, and you can write your own, of course. The first extension I used was debugging for Chrome. So I would start the debug tool, it would open up a Chrome window, and I could place breakpoints in Visual Studio Code, and it interacted with it perfectly after a bit of tweaking. It has lint in there and PowerShell. Those are the ones that I use. The C# one, which I want to touch on more because .NET Meetup Group, is really great. It feels like a lightweight Visual Studio 2015. You've got IntelliSense, you have it tells you what dependencies are being used, and you can navigate to what you're using and stuff like that. It's much better than I expected. Much better than, in my opinion, Atom.io or anything else that kind of does this sort of thing. And then out of the box debugging, which is I think the most useful tool for a programmer. Out of the box, it'll do Node.js. You can just start your project.json, say it's in Node.js, and you click run, and you don't need any extensions for that. For everything else, there are extensions. All right, so change my display to make this talk a lot easier. Great. So again, this is Visual Studio Code. On the left here, you kind of have what you can click on and get support, debugging, that sort of thing. Here's your directory, which is what you opened up at the beginning. The first thing I wanted to show off was the terminal support. So as soon as I opened up this file, it recognized that it was a PowerShell file. So it started my PowerShell terminal for me, and I could run it real quick. And then it just ran it right there in the terminal. It pushed a directory and popped it. And then one thing that I really like is that if I don't want to run the entire batch script, this gets really handy whenever you have a very large one, you can just highlight some code, right-click, and hit Run Code, and it'll run just that piece of code. So if you're like 100 lines into one, you could initialize a couple of variables and just highlight what you need and test it out real quick. It makes iterating a whole lot faster. Next, I'd like to talk about some JavaScript. This is a very simple example, very contrived. So this is obviously a JavaScript file. I'm going to run it. Yes? I don't know. I can kind of move this up and maybe I can... I don't know how to do that. So I'll just read it to you. Right now it's looping in a circle. Control-Shift period. Control-Shift. There we go. Yeah, scrolling's hard on a trackpad, but a little better? Good enough? Okay, so I'm just running a loop, and because of the debugger, I can hit a breakpoint. And there we are. I can inspect my variables, 47. I can set my variables. Oops. And continue execution. There we go. I just blew you guys' minds. Integrated development. Obviously, you can use this with Chrome and all that other sort of stuff, and it's great. And then finally, I included a C# example. It's another contrived example. Because I'm using Visual Studio Code for my presentation, and I have a folder for example 3, which is the C# part, it doesn't quite know right now that this is a C# application. So in a new window, I opened up just example 3, and now it recognizes like, oh, I'm a C# application. So now when I go to debug, I have different options here. I can I can just run this one, or I can attach to an existing application, that sort of thing. My little battle simulator, and it did some random stuff. So just like before, I can hit my breakpoints. And this is .NET Core code right now, and I'm able to examine properties and that sort of thing. I could change them with the immediate window. And then, like I was saying before, you can get cool stuff like, I see I have 2 references, and I can click on them and that sort of thing. So sometimes it's just nice whenever you have a gigantic C# application and you need to change one project and it's just going slow in Visual Studio. You can just open up that one project, work with it in here, because it'll run a lot faster because it just doesn't have all that extra stuff Visual Studio 2015 or 17 has. You can get it done and then go back to your bigger Visual Studio environment. That's all I got. I think I have some time if anyone had any questions. That's fine. Thank you. Oh, yes, sir. Only .NET Core, but what's cool is you can run Visual Studio Code and .NET Core on a Mac, because it's all supported on a Mac or Linux or whatever environment that I'm aware of. Thank you.